we've launched this literally this week. So we went live with it on Wednesday. The idea of it, sort of the initial meetings and stuff were happening sort of January time. But I had a big realization about this time last year that I've been in the podcasting space for a long while, but mainly in the paid for sort of production realm. Looked at it, I was like, this is the thin end of the wedge. When I was looking at what the likes of Peter Crouch doing and what Gary's doing with Goalhanger and what the fellow studios are doing, there's a big opportunity here, but the bigger opportunity comes with obviously bigger risks and therefore bigger rewards. I was just at a point, I was like, I can't just keep doing the pay for production thing as it stands. I wrote a blog about 5 years ago, which I think James actually published in Pod News, and I was like, why doesn't Peter Crouch leave the BBC and run his own thing? Because if he owned the IP of it, he'd earn loads more money. Ironically, I've subsequently found out that Peter Crouch actually read that blog. I'm not saying that's why he left the BBC and started his own thing, but he did read the blog. I'll take it.
Claim it as your idea. Don't be shy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that was the rationale sort of around it, essentially. There's a massive opportunity in podcasting right now, and I think we're very uniquely placed in terms of the celebrity talent we can reach, plus the experience that we've got, that we can actually help people to really maximize the value opportunity that there is right now for people to own their IP and build platforms rather than just having a podcast as a paid for, 500 quid, 1,000 quid session talent sort of thing.
So why pivot? Because, I mean, obviously, Cara Swisher might be coming after you.
Yeah, so Pivot Productions Group, I very carefully checked. There is nothing that is copywritten. It was also for me. So I got into this business with who's obviously very well known for football. He's very well known as playing for England, playing for Tottenham, Newcastle. He's also a very well known broadcaster. He's very well known that he left that broadcaster very swiftly last year when he was unceremoniously sacked. So we sat there one day. I was like, well, this is a pivot for me because I've been in the production space, but it's a different direction. He went, well, it's definitely a pivot for me, as we all know why. So I was like, do you know what? I actually like pivot. And also he played in central midfield, which is the pivot role. I was like, this just works. So it's got a couple of double entendres for us.
Okay, cool. Now, so Jermaine Genius yourself, you say you've got access to numerous people. So what is the goal? I mean, is it just to create a platform for celebrities and then monetize it? Or, you said it's wider than podcasting. I think one of the things we are seeing now, and it'll be lovely to hear your take on it, which is, audio only podcasting. So I assume you're going to be video. I assume you're going to be multi-platform. So where are you going to start? What's the first show and what's the format?
Yeah, so we're calling it Visualize because that's what the cool kids in Shoreditch are calling it apparently. So we're going to go Visualize.
Speak, that is. Yes.
Yeah, okay, fine. Oh, maybe I'll retract that then and we'll just go video. So, it's already up and running literally again as of this week. So the first show we've launched, Jermaine is one of the co-hosts of it. The other co-host is famous international heavyweight boxing legend Derek Chisora, who is, again, a very interesting character, hence the name why it fitted under the Pivot brand. And we've launched a show called Let Me Tell You Something. And it's really an opportunity for Derek and Jermaine are actually really good friends, but people don't know about it. So they're basically getting on a load of their celebrity pals to have conversations that you wouldn't otherwise hear in a podcast format, because obviously they know stuff about each other that other people wouldn't ordinarily. So we've already recorded the first sort of 10 episodes. We've got Catherine Ryan, Eddie Hearn, Lethal Bizzle, Joe Cole, Michael Venom Page, got some really, really cool people. But to that extent, like Michael Venom Page came on, and normally I've only ever heard him talk about the UFC Cajun fighting. He talked about his conversion to Islam, which is a really interesting conversation that you wouldn't necessarily think you're going to get on a podcast with MVP. Definitely not one that's co-hosted by Jermaine and Derek as well. But that's what we want to do, create content opportunities that surprise people. And to your question about what's the bigger picture here, as I say, I spotted the opportunity in 2021 with sort of celebrity talent. I was like, why don't people just own the IP? But it has to be bigger than just the show. It's monetize the audio listens via programmatic, inserted ad sponsorship, etc. But where I think the opportunity is biggest at the moment is building that community. Mm-hmm. And I know community has been the buzzword for marketing since 2023. I think it was like word of the year, wasn't it, in the marketing space? But people who get it genuinely right and can have opportunities for their listeners and their viewers and their watchers to come and see them in a live show, but also do watch alongs and have an opportunity to come down to recording sessions. And where we're uniquely placed, because obviously we've already got some sort of celebrity quote unquote clout in terms of the people behind the business, but also I've run lots and lots and lots of podcasts over the years, so we know you're going to get a really good show. So I think it's going to give us the opportunity to show talent in a different way and give them the opportunity to be seen in different ways as well, because that's another big thing that I've done in my career is help people to really communicate the brand message that they want to communicate. And when you understand what you're trying to put out there as the perception, you build content around that. So it's definitely not for us the case of like some sort of big networks of like anyone who's famous, anyone's got a bit of a TikTok following, let's get them on and do a podcast because we can monetize it for 5 minutes. I don't think everyone should have a podcast. As a man who's launched 187 for clients around the world in the last 7 years, should everyone have a podcast? No, absolutely not. Some people are only interested in 15-second short form TikTok videos, and that's absolutely fine as a medium, and that's not to disregard it. But that doesn't mean that short form, short attention audience wants or needs to come across for longer term conversations. Someone who's dancing to TikTok trends, does anyone care about their thoughts on, deep seated psychology and manifestation for 45 minutes? Probably not.
Just got visions of Derek Chisore doing TikTok dances now. I'm sorry.
That's going to happen. That will happen. I'm not going to be the person to force him to do it. Someone braver and bigger than me is going to have to.
I was going to say, I wouldn't ask him either. So we get that. One of the interesting trends that James and I are talking about, obviously, is more and more content going behind paywalls. People are beginning to value quality content, finally. Podcasting I've always called the second-class digital citizen because the expectation it's free with ads wrapped around it, right, as the way of monetizing it. And advertising isn't generating for most people the type of return they need in order to grow. So we are seeing a lot of money being put into Patreon, Memberful. We're seeing Substack. We're seeing a lot of, you talked about watch-alongs again, people paying super chats. So it's very interesting. Zateo is Mehdi Hassan, who I really love, went onto Substack. We had a couple of people talk about not putting their content onto YouTube because they want to own the IP. They don't want to lose control of it. So as the IP creator, what platform are you going to put your content through as the filter? Is it going to be on Substack? Or are you going to put it to Patreon? Or are you going to leave it to the open podcasting world? Or are you going to go to YouTube? Where are you?
I think moving forward, it depends on a show-to-show basis. I think one thing that we still not cracked in the podcasting space, and I've been obsessed with podcasting since 2010, and I've never seen the discoverability challenge. I know you guys talk about it regularly on the show, but the person who cracks that discoverability challenge is going to be, do very well for themselves. But we're not there yet. So fundamentally, I'm of the belief that you need to go and build an audience. You need to go and be where people are. If people like Apple Podcast, even though they haven't done anything very innovative in the last 20 years, apart from making Battersea Power Apple for a night, then so be it. And I'm one of those people, by the way. I know that Spotify's got a bunch of new shiny bells and whistles, and they serve me up clips and blah, blah, blah. I just don't like it as a user experience. I prefer Apple. So we need to be on Apple. We need to be on Spotify. We need to be on YouTube. However, there will be extensions and brand extensions which will be put behind paywalls, which will be behind subscriptions. But I think it's also got to fit. So something like Let Me Tell You Something, which is a very varied entertainment-based podcast. I don't know, because we're 1 week, we've got, Catherine Ryan, who's obviously a massive comedian. Then we'll have UFC, then we'll have football, then we'll have, music with Lethal Bizzle. I don't think you're going to get the sort of audience that's going to go, right, I'm going to pay for the additional content because it's so varied. However, obviously with Jermaine's background, we're already sort of working on a slate of shows at the moment. Next one being football, being an obvious place for us to go because, again, there's a big sort of market, a big market opportunity. With that, I do think that there would be a lot of additional revenue streams that could potentially be things like being behind a paywall. Would it be a Patreon? Would it be, if we're going to bring in an element of fantasy football, would we let people join our league? Would we come and do watch alongs? We would let people come and do could we do something with the Ballers League, for example? Well, I think that lends itself more towards it. One of the big things, and they haven't reinvented the wheel, but I think The Rest is Football has been very much driven, the growth of that show, via a newsletter. I mean, again, they haven't reinvented the wheel. Newsletters have been a thing, but podcasters haven't traditionally used them. Does a show like Let Me Tell You Something need a newsletter? No, I don't think it does. Does one about football? Yeah, I think it will. So we're going to do it on a case-by-case and a show-by-show basis. We won't be going one size fits all. Right, let's chuck everything onto all the platforms for 6 months, and then we'll do a half an episode, and the other half you have to get on Patreon, because I just don't think it's going to work in that format, really.
Yeah, I mean, look, you will hear on Pod News Weekly in the coming weeks, I'm a very anti Patreon and Memberful in the way that it's done. I think you split your audience, and I think what you're asking your audience to do and the creator to do is have an open account, then a private account, and then go left and right. It needs to be in one place at one time, but we'll talk about that in the future. But so given that you talked about, Goal Hanger and the rest is their suite of podcasts, are you going to go through the moniker of naming all your shows in a very similar way to get a brand stable environment of them, so there's brand recognition, or are you going to go and individualize your shows?
The plan is to individualize them because the people who are behind them are all individuals. I think what Goal Hanger accidentally hit on with one show name really working, it's been a brilliant bit of branding. Brilliant. To be fair, like our first show, Let Me Tell You Something, like that lends itself really nicely. Let me tell you something about football. Let me tell you something about boxing. Let me tell you something about, but we'd already sort of brokered the deal in a way that wasn't going to work for us. So, because there's actually one of the sponsorship networks who we're in initial talks with, like, that's a brilliant brand and brand extension. I was like, yeah, it really is, annoyingly, but we can't really use it in that instance. And I also think that the rest is as a brand is good because all the shows are brilliant. I don't think you necessarily, maybe 2% of that audience growth is down to it being part of the rest is stable. The rest of it is down to it just being really, really good content. So, yeah, we're going to go down the individual option. Had I have brokered the IP rights agreement, or let me tell you something, that might be a different conversation. But hindsight is 2020.
It is indeed. Now, look, going forward then, so how big do you think you want this to be? Are you going to be stateside? Are you going to go international language? Where's the sky and the limit?
I can't see us going international language because, to be honest, it's just not a space that I've been in. But this is where I have got to be really careful because I've been making podcasts since 2017. As I mentioned, I've launched 187 shows for clients around the world. I operate traditionally in the B2B paid for production space. So clients like a Ted Baker, for example, who've done their show earlier this year, they'll come to us, go, we want a podcast, and we make it based on making really good content. But this whole new space has got new opportunities. So I'm being very mindful to bring my, and I've been around the radio and the branding game for over 20 years. I'm very mindful to bring all that experience, but also not bring my preconceived ideas to a certain extent. But I think the pie of UK and English language podcast is big enough in the here and now. Will there be offshoots into other countries? Yeah, for sure. Would we do something around a particular sporting example? Again, with Jermaine's background in football, it makes sense that we would have an offshoot podcast for, if we'd have got our act together a bit quicker, FIFA World Club Championships, for example. Will we do something for the Euros and the World Cup? Yes, we'll do that. But I think we will be plenty busy enough without needing to venture into sort of like different languages and that kind of stuff. For me personally, and again, this is just a personal choice, I don't want to have an Acast number of shows under our stable. I don't want to be responsible for thousands of shows. I love the idea of a dozen or a couple of dozen really, really brilliant shows that are very well curated, that have got a great team around them. I've got brilliant producer, short form editor, exec producer. That's where I see it being. I love for me, if I'm looking at it now in the next sort of, where do we want to go in 36 months, I'm looking more at Goal Hanger, Flight Studio, Fellas Studios, rather than sort of trying to become Wondery, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, Wondery being, the prime example that then sells out to Amazon and, and has the 300 podcasts in its stable. What keeps you awake at night? What's the thing that worries you? Is it market saturation? Are you going into a market that's a very congested space? Is it the revenue growth? Do you fear that, we're plateauing, or there's much more growth to come from podcasting? What keeps you awake at night when you start this idea?
I don't think anything really keeps me up at night other than just literally the workload of launching a new show. Anyone who's done this before knows how much work goes into it when you add into the fact that you've got sort of big name talent and you've got lots of logistics and there's a team involved in it and all that kind of stuff. So logistically, it's been a very fraught couple of months. But in terms of what keeps me up at night, in terms of from a fear perspective, I think we've just got so much further to go with podcasts. You look at all the stats. It's still under 50% of people are listening on a monthly basis. It's just over a quarter of people are listening on a weekly basis. I still think we're not quite blue ocean in the podcasting space, but we're definitely not red ocean. We're maybe like a bit of a murky bluey purple realistically, but I also think that the cream will always rise to the top. it doesn't matter how busy the space gets, great shows will find an audience, and there's a great opportunity. And the brilliant thing with how we're doing it in terms of shared ownership with our talent and shared IP with our talent is that everyone's got a vested interest to pull as hard as each other in the same direction. And we're also in a really fortunate position because we've got, you know, we've already had 3 or 4 people literally the last day go, oh, it's amazing what you're doing. Can we work with you? 3 out of those 4 are completely not right for us as a fit. So we're in a great fortunate position because we're bootstrapping it and we're not taking on VC money to get this up and running. We can decide who and what we want to work on, really. So it's just the only thing that I guess would keep you up at night is the excitement around the opportunity and how big this can be, really.
Excellent. No, that's the way to do it. Stay awake at night thinking of big dreams. That's better than, oh my God.
And fear, yeah.
James, look, congratulations on Pivot. Tell everyone if they want to find out more about it, where would they go?
Thank you, Sam. So they can go to pivotproductionsgroup.co.uk for more information. And you can go and check out our first show on the slate, which is Let Me Tell You Something, which is on Apple, Spotify and YouTube and not behind any paywalls.
Excellent. James Burtt, thank you so much, mate. Good luck and congratulations.